Welcome into another episode of Hockey Royalty Live, the official podcast of hockeyroyalty.com. The Holy Triumphant is back. We're going to be talking offensive struggles, Kings clinch in the playoffs. Hey, do we need some line changes? Get in the chat, like and subscribe. Let's go. I like it. I like it. We got some of you Hockey Royalty listeners coming in early. CJ, hey guys, looking forward to some Kings talk tonight. So are we. And Topanga says hello, hello. And hello and low indeed. Joe, Russ, how are you guys doing?
Doing good. I am sitting here enjoying this dumpster fire that is this Flames-Jets game. I think each team has had at least 5 power play opportunities. The Flames, as we're taping this, are winning 2-1 with 12 minutes left. It's a big game. I mean, for this last spot in the playoffs in the Western Conference, so it doesn't really have anything Kings tied to it, but it's just some entertaining hockey, and teams are playing like it's playoff already, so I'm loving it. How you guys doing?
I'm doing great. I mean, I'm on like no sleep, which is incredible. I don't know how I'm even up right now, but it's awesome. Happy to be back. Listen to the show last week, boys. Well done. Was at the Sabres game watching the Devin Levi experience. Really cool. They love that kid in Buffalo. I'm tell you right, chanting his name. He was buzzing. So great first game for him. That was a fun game against the Rangers, who stunk that night. But all in all, doing well. A little bit of a rough patch here for the Kings last couple of games, I guess, with the Oilers one last night. So I'm sure we'll get into that. But Rando, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I saw Levi like during the TV timeouts, like takes a swig of water, then goes back to his crease and like gets down on both knees and like, and he said it's like an homage to his dad because his dad watched Star Wars and that's like their favorite scene together when the Jedi gets down on both knees to like manifest, all this kind of stuff. And I was like, was that kind of weird for you seeing it the first time? And like they're trying to like shovel the ice around him.
Yeah,
No,
I was at the game with my dad and my 2 brothers, and 2 of my brothers, I should say, and it was it was one of the first things we noticed, the way he did that. But he's got a very, very consistent routine. Like he makes a save, the whistle blows, he skates over to the glass, he taps the glass, comes back. Like he's really, really into it. I don't know if it's a superstition or it's just part of a routine. He's fun to watch. There's no doubt about that. That's for sure.
Goalies are a different breed, aren't they?
They are different people. They really are. But
if it works for him, seems to be working. So
yeah, and he's a confident kid. And I'm going to say right now, I got some Jonathan Quick vibes watching him. He's not a big guy.
Oh boy,
the way he leans and looks around, like to find guys, he's extremely athletic, lightning quick in the crease. It's just there were moments where he made some saves. I was like, man, I don't know. I'm like I said, I'm not a goalie expert, but it looked like a young Jonathan Quick at times. So it looks like they got themselves a goalie.
Trapper coming in saying hello to you guys. Thank you. And Troy Miller, first time in the chat, I believe. I don't care about these last 4 games. I just want a healthy team. We're going to get to that as well. The health of this organization. Thank you, Troy, for coming in and getting involved in the chat. Appreciate it. Coming over here, let's start with the first one, clinch in the playoffs. Let's start with something happy. Hey, we've got an X by the name. We're in. Congratulations, LA Kings. Phenomenal. I believe we're up over 100 points, if I remember correctly. And so which was kind of like the benchmark for us in the beginning of the season. Is this team going to improve? Are they going to hit triple digits? So what does clinching the playoffs mean to you? Like, how does this team met expectations so far? Is that solely dependent on playoffs? But you guys can take it any way you want. But I mean, what does this mean to you guys?
This is pretty much what I expected. And for this to be a successful season for the Kings, I thought they had to make the playoffs. And sure enough, 100 points on the season. I don't think that's anything you can complain about, especially with we still have 4 games remaining. So that can go even further. And I think their franchise record for points in the season is 105. So we can see them break that if they're able to find a way to scrape out 6 points in these last few games or so. But yeah, someone asked me the other day, like, do you consider this a successful season, or would you consider this a successful season for the Kings? And I think it's already a success. I mean, even if they go out in the first round of the playoffs, I mean, we think about last year, the team defied expectations. Nobody expected them to go to the playoffs. So if we're kind of looking at the trajectory that this team should be on, this should have been the year where they should have been contending for a playoff spot. And sure enough, they've solidified their playoff spot more than with at least 5 games remaining in the season. So I think it's been a great, successful season so far. I mean, obviously, there's been a little bit of a low spot the last few games, and more that has to do with the injuries that have been going on. But I think it's been good, and no matter what happens in the playoffs, I think Kings fans should be happy with how this team has done so far.
I agree. I don't have any issues if the Kings, obviously I hope they don't get bounced in the first round, but if they do, I don't think it's a disappointment. I don't think this team is quite ready to be that cup contender. It's kind of funny. You look like a month, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, we were talking about how wide open the West is. It's very mediocre. Anybody can come out of it. And all of a sudden it's like, I don't know how mediocre it is. Like Edmonton's dynamite right now. Vegas looks really good. Colorado's getting healthy. They're playing some really good hockey. All of a sudden, the West, like these top teams are the top teams again. And are the Kings among that discussion? I think they're a little bit behind those teams. So maybe it's not going to be as easy to come out of the West as maybe we would have thought a couple of months ago. But I think this has been a successful season. You've seen the growth from some players. Quentin Byfield getting a significant amount of ice time this year, and he's had his ups and downs, no doubt about it. You saw Adrian Kempe has exceeded what he did last season. Rasmus Kupari, like there's a lot of positives about the season. Obviously, Gabe Vilardi, Fiala's first year. There's a lot of good things about this season, and I just look at the way that they made the playoffs after the first half of the season was a train wreck in goal. Like they were, and it was heavily talked about, but like there's a lot of merit to it. I mean, to be a team with a negative goal differential and in a playoff position it doesn't happen. And they turned that around. Full marks to Rob Blake for having the guts to make the trade that he did. And now they're a plus 22 in the goal differential. So, and the goaltending has had a lot to do with that. So he's made some tough calls, and all in all, already, yes, I think this is a successful season from expectation standpoint for me anyways, coming into the season.
Richard coming in here saying the fact that the Kings hit 100 points with crap goaltending the first half of the season tell us they're better than and only going to get better. Yeah, I mean, your interesting point there, Joe. You're saying the West is wide open and this and that. If you look at the records since March 1st, which is right around the trade deadline, 7 of the top 10 teams are in the Western Conference. One of those teams being Vancouver, right? So it's just so weird. And then if you go outside the top 10, the next 2 teams are in the Western Conference. So the Western Conference is playing some good hockey down the stretch. You look at Edmonton, made some key, adjustments. Obviously, Colorado already had a good team getting healthy. LA, I would say, made some good additions at the trade deadline. So, like, the whole conference got better, and which I think is why we saw the Western Conference be so active at the trade deadline. You look at the East did it because of the fact that you had to have an arms race to compete with already the old good teams, and the West did it because it was so wide open. If you make a few key moves, you can be there. I think for me, it does depend on the playoff for me. And I think if we get waxed in the first round, regardless of our opponent, I'll be disappointed. And I think it'd be a little bit of a step back last year, regardless of what you say about the injuries. The guys we had injuries last year. We have injuries this year. Now, was it to our best forward or most productive forward? No. But, that's kind of something a team's got to overcome. And so I think if we get waxed by Edmonton or Vegas in the first round, I think it would be a disappointment for me, maybe a little bit step back, not meeting expectations. I don't necessarily think they have to win, but if it's a 6 or 7 game series, they look competitive, they play competitive, and then said team ekes it out. I would say, hey, like that was my expectation for this team this year, was to make the playoffs, be competitive in the first round, and potentially win a series there. So that's kind of where I would be at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think obviously it'd be a disappointment if we saw this team lose in the playoffs. The ultimate goal always is to win a Stanley Cup. But I think, like what Joe said, this team wasn't there now. It's not that we're saying that this team should just be happy with a playoff berth at that point and then just kind of throw it in the towel in the playoff time. But yeah, I mean, obviously we want them to try to win the Stanley Cup, and that'd be great. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of young talent on this team just still getting their feet wet. I mean, with a lot of talk about Quentin Byfield, and there's a little bit of the struggles of late. I mean, he's having a pretty good season. He's still only 20 years old. I mean, the other top prospect, Brant Clark, is not even playing in the NHL and looks to be all the real next anchor defenseman for the LA Kings and one of the best players, if not the best player in the OHL. So that looks pretty good. And you have some really good young players playing in the Reign. So this is still a young, developing team that's contending at this point. And the Western Conference, yeah, we were talking about it just a few months ago, Joe. Like we were talking about the Kings having that opportunity to even just get to the Stanley Cup final because the Western Conference was so bad.
Yeah.
And now the good teams are just starting to figure it out. I mean,
it's like they woke up.
Yeah, exactly. Colorado is figuring it out. Edmonton looks like they're ready for the playoffs. They're winning games 2-0, 3-1. I mean, that's not the type of Oilers that we've seen before in the past. And now that they're starting to get good goaltending, that's a little scary. So, yeah, I mean, we want the Kings to do good. We want them to excel in the playoffs. I'm with you too, Randon, though. If they do, like, just have a good performance, 6-7 games. If they bow out, it is what it is. But it would still be disappointing. But it's not like the end of the world where all of a sudden, okay, now we're in the midst of a rebuild. It's like, no, we're right at the beginning of really high trajectory for this team where, I mean, they've clinched the playoffs two seasons in a row. I mean, this could be the beginning of a long streak for a team that's got a lot of good young talent that's not even developing or producing in the NHL yet. So I think it's been a good year so far, and I'm looking forward to what happens in the future for this team too.
We looked at the way this team is constructed, and it's just the beginning, right? So, I mean, now the expectations playoff is every year. Whenever we get to a point where it's going to be Stanley Cup or bust, we'll see when that is. It kind of came out of nowhere for the 2012 team for some people, and then that was the expectation in 13, 14, 15. But we'll see how this team works out. I think it's going to be interesting that you look at the standings, it's pretty much locked in that we're going to be playing Edmonton. So we got to get healthy. The last two games weren't ideal, and let's start there. But before we do that, let's get with our DraftKings sponsorship here. The action never ends at DraftKings Sportsbook, especially this summer. With tons of ways to bet on your favorite sports, you can fuel your fandom and feel the heat this season like never before. Plus now, DraftKings Sportsbook is giving new customers a risk-free bet up to $1,000. That's right. Make your first bet up to $1,000, and if it doesn't win, get another shot to cash in. You can throw it down on all major action for baseball, golf, MMA, and more. Plus same-game parlays, spreads, money lines, over-unders, props. Your betting options feel endless. Do you want to bet on who wins the Masters, as well as maybe the Dodgers and a Kings win this whole week? You can do just that. Best of all, DraftKings is safe, secure, reliable. You can deposit and withdraw your cash whenever you want. Download DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code THPN. Make your first deposit and get a risk-free bet up to $1,000. That's promo code THPN only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions may apply. See show notes for details. So obviously the next topic is going to be offensive struggles, and that happened with the Edmonton game. So let's get into the game first, right? Obviously we lose 3-1. One was an empty netter. Arvidsson ties it up there. So what have we seen in the last two games with Edmonton, considering that they're most likely going to be our playoff opponent? What needs to obviously change? Needs to be scoring, which is why we're talking about offensive struggles. But is there any parts of the game that you did like in the last two games against that team? And that they should be able to take forward into the playoff matchup?
I mean, I thought 5-on-5, they looked really good. I mean, you hold the Oilers to no 5-on-5 goals in the last game, and what they had one in the previous game before that. So, yeah, I mean, that's something you can be very proud of and very happy if you're a Kings fan. I mean, this is an Oilers team that obviously has the best player in the world in Connor McDavid, and if not another top 5 player in Leon Draisaitl. If you can hold them to under a goal or less in 5-on-5 goals or 5-on-5 scoring, I think you should be really happy with. I mean, that's the reason why the offense is just become so much of a spotlight these last few games, is because the defense is playing so well. They should be winning those games if you're holding a team like that to only scoring so few goals. So it's been tough because, yeah, I think that's the biggest biggest positive takeaway you can get from that game last night. So that's what makes it so unfortunate to lose a game like that, is when you play so well 5-on-5, but you're just so quiet offensively. Like it didn't feel like there were that many like scoring chances for the Kings. Like, I mean, even the Arvidsson goal kind of came out of nowhere, and it was, I mean, I don't want to say it was a fluke goal, but I mean, it's a half clapper from the blue line. I mean, that hardly really ever goes in. So it's tough, because I think that's a huge positive takeaway in terms of defensive game. They're sticking, like what McClellan said, they're sticking to their game management, their focus, all the attention to detail is still there, but offensively, it's just struggling right now.
I mean, it was a good game defensively, 5-on-5, right? They played a really good team game, but they created next to nothing offensively, as you said, Russ. So they were second best most of the game just because of that. Like they couldn't do both things. And Edmonton, because of their star power, is just, as the game goes on, is that they're gonna get their chances. And then obviously, if you take penalties, it's over. Two drastically different games between the two teams. The game in Edmonton was a playoff atmosphere. That was a playoff game. It was physical. It was hard. It was up and back. It was a great hockey game, intense hockey game. The Kings, and you know what? To their credit, I think they had to. They're banged up, but they dragged Edmonton through the mud in Los Angeles, which again I think was kind of their game plan, and it worked to a certain extent. They kept themselves in the game. They hung on, which I think was probably the game plan. And you mentioned something earlier, Russ, and I'm so glad you mentioned it, because I haven't seen it really being talked about at all. And it's something I've been thinking about since last night. It's like the scary thing right now about the Oilers is this idea that they're a weak defensive team with weak goaltending, and they're going to beat you 6-3 or 6-4, and this, that's not going to work in the playoffs. What should scare people about the Oilers is, sure, they can do that if you want to, but they can also beat you 2-1. They can also beat you 2-0. That's pretty scary. If that team's getting saves like they're getting, if that team, they're not an elite defensive team, but they're not bad. That's a solid defensive team, especially with the addition of Ekholm. If they're comfortable playing this style of game too, home and away, boy, that's a scary, scary team in Edmonton. So I'm glad you mentioned that earlier, Russ, because I totally agree. But it's a tough spot right now the Kings are in. It's tough to play a team like this. You're down Fiala, you're down Velarde, you're down Mikey Anderson. I don't care. Like, it may sound like an excuse, but the Kings can't survive that. And I think, even Mikey Anderson, while he's a defensive defenseman, he does help the Kings in transition a little bit. He's not inept at that. He stops plays at the blue line as well as anybody in the league. So it doesn't let a team like Edmonton get set up as frequently in the offensive zone, and the Kings defensive zone, so they can get up and out a little bit quicker, so they can play better offense, if that makes sense, with their best defensive defenseman in the lineup. And they can't survive that. It's just a tough spot right now. They really got to get healthy. So I'm not losing too much sleep over the offensive struggles. I don't know if you are, Rando, or Russ, but remember, what did we talk about since the deadline? How easy the Kings' schedule was. Let's enjoy it while it's happening. But when the rubber hits the road and we get to the end of March and we start to play a really tougher schedule, not to mention 4 road games, that'll be a little bit more of a test than beating up on St. Louis and Washington and Columbus and Montreal. And well, it's, partially because of some injuries, but partially because guys are playing good teams now. So it's not as easy as it was going to be when they were dominating at home.
But what's funny is, like, they've only lost to the Oilers, and then they lost to the Flames, and the Flames just pretty much played the same type of game that the Kings played last night,
Yep.
where they just tried to go into a defensive shell and try to prevent these games. But obviously, it's so much more magnified because it's looking like the Kings might face the Oilers in the first round. So that's why we get so down in the dumps, and Kings fans are all doom and gloom right now, is because it looks like, man, they just can't beat the Oilers at this point, especially with all the question marks with injuries. And I've seen people ask, like, what's the status of Velarde and Fiala? And it's like, we just don't know. I mean, someone asked McClellan about it at practice, and McClellan's playoff ready. He's not going to give any kind of ounce of information in terms of updates he's just been the same old McClellan. Just, hey, the guys that are in are going to be in, and the guys that are out are going to be out. That's pretty much all we get. So at this point, you just kind of hope to wake up one morning and see a practice and see Kevin Fiala or Velarde or Anderson just hop on in a regular skate and go from there. But at this point, it's just you got to win with the guys you got. So that's all you can really hope for as a Kings fan. But I just want to point out one real positive takeaway, and it is like we just talked about with the Oilers winning games that are really kind of low scoring. But in all 4 games that the Kings played the Oilers, they didn't score more than 3 goals in any game. So defensively, it's good. It's just you have to find a way to generate a little bit of offense if you're LA, if you're going to go forward right here.
Yeah, I'm gonna disagree a little bit on this. Not on your point, but Joe asked, are you upset with the offensive struggles? And I am a little bit. Our darling line, the line that was so productive in every aspect, the Kopitar, Kempe, Byfield line, not productive. I don't think they've, I look back, I think somebody posted that they haven't had a point in quite some time. Byfield only has 2, normal goals, I guess non-empty netters in 30, in his entire time on that line. Like you're facilitating, you're doing other things, but you're not producing when you should be producing. And everybody was like, hey, he needs minutes. He needs this. And now being on the first line is awesome for his development because he's getting time on ice with quality players. But this is not a developmental league. Like we need to be winning games, and they were winning games. The point streak was evident of that, and they were playing well during the point streak. It's tough for me because hypothetically, if these guys are healthy and they come in and they wax Edmonton both games, and you're like, okay, now we're getting ready for the playoffs. This team's playing really good. We can compete on this level, and it kind of just gives you that, ease of the mind when coming into the playoffs. But now there's all this unknown, right? The top line ain't scoring. Fiala, Velarde, Mikey Anderson. We don't know when, if they're going to be healthy in this whole thing. There's just a lot of unknown in this. And then you hope that your top line carries the team through all this turmoil, and they haven't these past 2 games. Are you guys at all worried that the shine has left that line? Is it just, hey, every line goes through ebbs and flows, and this is only 4 games? How are you really feeling about that top line for us?
I certainly don't want to overreact to just a couple of games. That said, if you look back at the last 10 games, they've only scored, I think they've only been on the ice for 6 goals at 5-on-5. And you probably want a little bit more out of that line. Now, so the reason I'm kind of hemming and hawing is in that 10 games, they've been the better line than the team that they matched up against. They've better in shot attempts, better in scoring chances, better in expected goals. They've even better in actual goals. They've outscored their opponents 6-1 in over the last 10 games. You look at the last 5, it's a lot worse though. Okay. And I acknowledge that. It's just the problem is you're missing 2 key players in their offense. So I'm not opposed to shuffling things up a little bit, just to, even if it is just for a game to shake up some things. I'm not, I get that. I'm okay with it. But I wouldn't just expect it to turn some things around. It's too small. Just these last few games, I'm not going to go crazy over 4 or 5 games.
Yeah, I'm not. It's this thing. It's I've seen a lot of the, I guess vitriol toward Byfield the last few games, and I get it. I mean, you have a player on the first line, and he should be expected to score. It's just tough because that line was doing so well, and a lot of it was because of his production. I mean, he had a lot of primary assists and was doing a lot of good things playmaking wise, but obviously he's just having a hard time putting the puck in the net, which is tough for a first line winger. So I think it's tough because the expectations for Quentin Byfield just all of a sudden went through the roof when he got put on that first line, which seems a little unfair. He's still only 20 years old, and this is, I guess this should be considered his first real season in the NHL.
Yeah.
So I wonder if going forward maybe we see a change there, just to kind of shake things up, maybe give him a better matchup, even though that it's not like that line is being outplayed. I mean, defensively, I haven't looked at their metrics, but I mean, I can't remember a time when they're being hemmed in the zone because of Quentin Byfield's play, or even can't think of a time when Quentin Byfield's had this like flub or mistake. That I think that line 5-on-5 has been okay. I mean, it's not like they've been bad for this team. So I just wonder if with the players missing, with the power play that's taken so much of a dent really from the players that are not in the lineup. I mean, that first power play unit is just terrible at this point without Fiala and Velarde, which I mean is obviously going to happen. But I just wonder if maybe we see a little bit of a shakeup in the lines with those players missing, just to find something else, just to see if there's any new chemistry that McClellan can somewhat unlock with the struggles that have happened the last few games.
Yeah, I definitely get it. But I guess the only thing I'll say that's a little unfair to Byfield, because listen, I get it. You're playing the top line. You've been there for a long time. You got to see more production at some point. He is playing well. At some point, the production does have to come a little bit more frequently than it's been. I'm not losing sleep over it because he's a young player, and I'm just not worried about it. He showed more good than he has bad this season, so I'm okay with it right now. But it's not like he's not the only one in that line that's not scoring. You know, I mentioned those 10 games. He's got 3 primary assists in those last 10 games, which isn't exactly lighting the world on fire, but it's as much as anybody else on that line has. I think Kempe might have 4 points, but Kopitar's got 3. It's not as if anybody else is doing much. So he's catching a lot of heat. Some of it is, I guess, sort of fair, but some of it's kind of not when there's plenty of other guys right now that are not chipping in. So it's just a rough stretch.
I think it's something a little bit of both. Like you need him, like he's been given the opportunity. It's not a developmental league. He needs to start putting up some points. I get it. I think with the line changes this next couple of days, I think Russ brought up a good point. I kind of want to hit on it again, is that we don't know how long said players are going to be out. What if they're out into game 1, game 2? You can't just like, hey, let's like fold up because Fiala and Velarde on the lineup. Mm-hmm. They're going to have to go into the playoff matchup. They're going to have to play who the guys they're going to have to play. And you can't rely on one line. There was right here. Other teams, Holden 92 says, other teams can focus on shutting down that one line now that the second and third line aren't as dangerous without Fiala and Velarde. That's what happened in previous years when we weren't as good. You need multiple lines that can come in. And so I wouldn't be opposed to shaking this up. Obviously, I don't know what McEwen is even doing on this roster. Like they need to put Jad in the lineup, please. Like I think he's top 5 in points per 60 on this team. Joe's probably got that stat in his brain somewhere, but like, I like, what are we doing here? Like, what is this going? If he's not brought in to be a bruiser, if he's not fighting or hitting people or being an instigator, then like, really, what is he there for? Like, he's sucking up extra Gatorade at this point on the bench.
Don't get it.
And, yeah, I mean that trade just it was weird at the time. It's still weird now.
It's getting weirder, Russ.
It's getting more awkward for all of us to have to keep talking about why he's only getting 3 minutes a night. I just think it's just the line changes for me are in preparation for what could happen in the playoffs. Now, maybe the Kings know, hey, Velarde and Fiala could have played last night. We're sitting them out of precaution. They're not going to play the last 4 games, and that's our game plan. Fine. Great. They know that, we don't. But if for some reason that one of them or all of them are going to be out, like shake the lines up, right? I mean, I think we have one more actual call-up because we've used a couple of emergency call-ups, but I wouldn't be opposed to seeing Fagimo come up, seeing what we can get from him. Obviously play some Jad there. Mix the lines up a little bit. See if you can strike some gold. I mean, everybody and their mom has been asking for Kaliev to be moved up for his shot. I don't know if that's an option. You're looking at those types of things, and those moves are going to have to be made. I mean, I wouldn't even mind seeing Grundy moved up to the second line like he was in the playoffs. The guy's been sniping it left and right. He's been playing very well, super consistent. Maybe he should get some more minutes and see what we can do there. So I just really think it's something that needs to happen just because out of preparation. Because Russell said, like, what if you strike gold and you can go to that line in the playoffs? Even if everybody's healthy. What if everybody gets healthy? You were into one game. It's a stagnant game. There's no offense. Hey, let's switch it back up to that line that was good for those 2-3 games. See if we can catch fire, right? Like, I just think it's something for preparation for the playoffs that needs to happen. I don't know what you guys think about that kind of approach.
If McClellan wants to shuffle some things around, because at least what he knows is I can always go back to Byfield with Kopitar campaign. I can always go back to Dano, Moore, and Arvidsson if need be, right? If whatever he decides to shake up, that doesn't work either, you can always go back to it. So I don't have a problem with it. Yeah, I think that's fine. At the end of the day, though, it is going to be inherently more difficult to generate offense without Kevin Fiala. That is going to happen. I mean, it may be an excuse, but he is the play driver on this team. And it's going to be difficult to generate offense without him. They're going to have to figure out a way somehow, but it's going to be a hell of a lot harder.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if it is kind of weird because we don't know the extent of these injuries. So yeah, I kind of could see what Randon's saying. Like, hey, maybe Fiala and Velarde are going to come back and be ready for playoffs. So they just don't want to shake two things or up a little too much with the line chemistry with some of the players that are already playing or still in the lineup. But it's tough because we just don't know. So obviously we're going to comment on it. And I think there should be some shakeups. And I wouldn't mind even drastic shakeups, whether it's putting Byfield back on the third line center, putting Kapari as a winger on that third line, or moving Iafallo back up, having Kempe play with Dano. Like let's figure something else out because offensively, I mean, even with the win in Vancouver and Seattle, where obviously they're good wins and you like to see them come out with the 4 points there. Offensively, they were still struggling. It was just kind of more of a grind out type game. So it's tough because we're kind of getting to the point where we were so, I guess, spoiled with all those like six goal games, like 5 goal games. Just so now it's like we've totally forgot like this history of Kings hockey where they win games 3-1, 3-2. And whenever they don't score more than 4 goals a game, then we're like, oh, what's going on here? So, but it is tough because, I mean, even against the Oilers, a team that they're more than likely going to play, they just haven't found a way to generate an offense. So I don't know if it's maybe trying to shake things up. Like we haven't seen Dano be this productive offensive player that we saw from him last year. So maybe you try to shake things up with him as who's he's playing with, or even just moving Byfield back to the third line center position and try to get him some better matchups. So it's tough because we want these players to come back. And yeah, like Joe said, the offense is going to be a little bit more stagnant without Fiala and Velarde, but I would like to see a little bit more of a change.
Regardless, though, remember two of these last 5 games, who's Dano playing against? Connor McDavid. Who's Kopitar playing against? Leon Draisaitl. It ain't going to be easy. So you can shuffle them up however you want, but when push comes to shove in a week and a half, those are going to be the matchups, and that's going to be difficult. So that's where Fiala hurts even more, because when Fiala's playing on that third line with Lizotte and he doesn't have to be out there dealing with that crap, that's where the big miss is, I think. And again, obviously we don't know anything about the injuries. I don't know anything about the injuries, and I don't want to speculate on the injuries. I'm cautiously optimistic that Fiala will be back in some form, just because he's at least made appearances recently. So I'm hopeful that, I don't expect him to be 100%, but I'm hopeful that he'll at least be available for playoffs. But remember, like part of the reason for the offensive struggles is you're dealing with 2 of the best players on the planet defensively, and that just is what it is sometimes, and you're going to have to figure out another way. That's where you're looking for your depth. You're looking for your third line. You're looking for your fourth line to be able to chip in and contribute. And Lizotte hasn't been doing it quite the same as since Fiala has been hurt, and Velarde for that matter too. He lost both his wingers, so that's been a struggle for Lizotte. And then in the fourth line, you've got a guy that you're playing 3 minutes a night and providing nothing. So what could you realistically expect when it's not a good situation right now? The injuries are part of it, but I echo what Randon says and say it'd be nice to see Anderson Dolan get in this lineup to provide, again, it's just something, a little bit more than what we've seen from McEwen.
That's why I'm glad they brought up Jordan Spence, because the power play just looks so bad. I mean, they have to figure out something. I mean, I looked it up. The power play has contributed for 25% of the team's total goals this season. And so, I mean, that's a huge reason why we've seen this uptick in offense for the Kings. And the way that the power play looks, especially without Fiala and Velarde, it's probably I don't even think it's arguable. I think the two best individual skilled players on the team. I mean, the power play is just going to take a hit, and I think bringing up Jordan Spence can only help that. And I think I liked what Randon said earlier, where this team just has no balance right now. That balance that we saw throughout the early part of the season, where you had Fiala, your top point producer, on the third line. I mean, now that third line is just kind of there at this point. I mean, Arthur Kaliev's doing what he can. Even IFL's kind of pitching in here and there. But even with that, I mean, there's just this lack of where teams can really focus on Adrian Kempe and maybe even shutting down Victor Arvidsson. And then you don't have to worry about the bottom six because, the fourth line, even with how well Rasmus Kupari is playing, it's just they're just out there at this point. I mean, and not even playing more than 5 minutes a night, so it's tough.
Richard Rich comes in. We asked for this during the trade deadline show, but pretty much essentially, why do we trade Lemieux for McEwen? Did Lemieux ask for a trade? He never came out and said that. He said he was very grateful the first time here. He said playing in LA was one of the greatest experiences he's had as a player. I think they were just looking to add more right shot people. I think they were more looking to add toughness, but I mean, or exchange where the toughness was coming from, because Lemieux wasn't playing either. And so, I mean, I don't know if it's just right for left, doing what's best for Lemieux, giving him some time somewhere else. I mean, when we say we're baffled why this trade even happened, we didn't understand it then, and we don't understand it now. I mean, that's pretty much the answer I got for you.
I wonder if they just thought McEwen was maybe a better locker room guy than Lemieux. I don't know. I mean, I've seen it brought up that this is Lemieux's fourth team that he's played on. I mean, he's being coached now by Tortorella, who's obviously going to be he's going to have a crack the whip on him. He's not going to be afraid to do any of that with him. But it's tough because now they traded away a player that wasn't really playing for this player that was – all we heard was physicality and tenacity, and we saw the fighting highlights, and he had a broken jaw, which is okay, fine. We're not going to steam you that. But even in the games he's played, I think the last two games, Joe and I were talking about it, like I believe he had the jaw protection off in the Vancouver game, and he had it off last game, and he's played 4 minutes last night, and I think he played a little bit more Vancouver. It was back to back, but even still then, I can't think of a moment with McEwen in the lineup where I'm like, oh man, you saw McEwen do that? There just hasn't been that. It's just kind of been taking up ice time at this point. That's why it just seems so strange, and why we just keep questioning why that trade was even done, because you had young players that, I mean, Jared Anderson-Dolan was playing so well. And then, I mean, even McLellan was like, oh yeah, it's so hard to take these players out of the lineup. It's just such a difficult conversation to have. Okay, well, why do you trade for a player where you're going to play him and have him only play 3 minutes a night? Especially with a team that's lacking so much offense, and you're missing Jared Anderson-Dolan, a player that's been able to contribute offensively. I mean,
and on the power play.
And on the power play. I mean, I don't expect him to get power play minutes, but even then, I mean, you're looking for something in these last few games, and to keep trotting McEwen out there, it doesn't make sense.
The trade for McEwen was one thing. It's the continuing playing him. That's the totally separate thing. Like you can maybe, and I don't remember the contract situations and if there's cap space and all that stuff that was potentially opened up. I don't remember that offhand. So maybe from a trade aspect, it made some sense contractually, but you don't have to play him. Sorry.
Yeah, no. No, it's honest.
I think it just goes back to I hate that I'm going to bring up this name, but I just really wish Alex Turcotte was healthy, because I mean, it would be so much more of a kind of a fun thing to watch for Kings fans with all these injuries in the NHL lineup. They could see a player like Turcotte playing bottom 6 minutes as opposed to a player like McEwen, because I mean, you're not going to probably put in a player like Fagemo. You're not going to put in a player like Tyler Madden or even Alex Laferriere, even though as much as I love him, I mean, I would just love to see a player like Turcotte with all of his pedigree and his kind of competitive nature get in these games. And it's just, I don't know if it's just wishful thinking that at this point that he'll be healthy, but it's, like I said, it's just tough.
Let's get into the injuries here. Offensive struggles is a one thing, but line changes is also part of this topic. With the loss of your number one lefty, defensive pair is getting shaken up, guys. Gavrikov, Doughty, Jersey and Roy back together, all this kind of stuff there. Edler playing back-to-back games for the first time, and I don't know how long. They brought up Bjorn Foot, emergency call of Jordan Spence as well. So what are we seeing from this defensive group? What are you liking? What do you think needs to get shaken up? Are there any line changes there that need to be evident for this team to succeed?
It's really tough when Edler also went out. That makes things tricky. Because Bjorn Foot is around. So honestly, I said this when Mikey Anderson went down. And that was with Edler in the lineup, and I think I still say, and I don't know what the status of Edler is either, obviously. I genuinely think the Kings should consider playing 7 defensemen, because Edler can't play every game, and this is if Mikey Anderson is out. I'm prefacing this by saying that Mikey Anderson is just he can't, he's out. That's if he's out, I think they should consider playing 7th defenseman just to ease some of the burden on pretty much everybody on that left side. Gavrikov, I think he was really bad in the first Edmonton game. I think he's struggling with the increased minutes and with the increase in competition. He was sitting in really nicely with Roy playing in that kind of 19, 20 minutes a night. I think now he's getting into 22 plus minutes a night, playing against having to deal with who he's having to deal with, whether it's McDavid or Draisaitl. I think I just don't like that. I don't think it's best suited for him, especially for where he was playing. Obviously, Edler, like I said, I don't think he can play every game. Bjornfoot's not a regular. So I think they should consider playing potentially 7 defensemen. I guess it's not the worst thing in the world when you're only playing one forward on the fourth line 3 minutes anyways. What's the difference? So Spence has come up. I think as is, it's not what I would do, but I guess what the best thing that they can probably do is go Gavrikov, Doughty, Jersey, Roy. I would go Spence Walker, and that's how I'd roll next game. Again, I don't know the situation if Edler can come back or how long Spence can be up or how the emergency call-up works for any of that stuff. But if that's the decor that they have available to them, I guess that's probably what I would like to see. But I do think the loss of Mikey Anderson is significant. And I don't hate the idea of playing 7 defensemen to ease some of the burden from some of these guys.
Yeah, I totally agree. I kind of like your defensive lineup there. I mean, it's just this is the lineup that they have right now with no Mikey and no Edler. I mean, Gavrikov is really the only, I guess, solid lefty that they have. I mean, Toby, as much as a lot of people love him and want to see him in the lineup, it is what it is with Bjorn Foot. I mean, I don't think he was bad last night, but it's like you're going to get what you're going to get. And it was more or less spot starts and spot playing time that he was really given. So I don't think they view him as a real solid option as terms of playing top 4 minutes, which he totally shouldn't. But yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing Spence and Walker together. I mean, Spence even had playoff time experience last year against the Oilers. So it's not a spot that he's not uncomfortable with or hasn't seen before. And like we talked about with the power play earlier, I mean, if you're looking for a little bit of a jolt of offense, I mean, with missing Fiala and Velarde, I mean, Jordan Spence is right there. I mean, this is a player that's quarterbacked power plays in the AHL and has been one of the best offensive defensemen in the AHL. So I think he's got to get ice time with the Kings because right now, I mean, it is what it is with the defensive line. I mean, Gavrikov, Doughty is more than likely going to be the top pairing. Jersey Roy hasn't been bad. I thought they had a pretty tough game last night, which was really weird because you don't really see them having a tough game too often. I think it was one of the few times they did, but last night they kind of got hemmed in a little bit. But I mean, that bottom pair, there's just really nothing there. And I think Walker has been playing a little bit better lately, if not a lot better than what he had in the first part of the season. So if you compare him with a player like with Jordan Spence, no matter who's really playing that left side, I mean, Rob Blake has come out and said that he's comfortable with Sean Walker playing the left side. So It is what it is. I mean, if you can bring in Spence and add him, and I think that'll give the defensive core a little bit of a jolt.
I think you're right there. I think the 7 defenseman would be an interesting tactic. And just, one, I think Jordan Spence is one of the better players on this team, and he is not even getting a shot. So would you be giving him more time? You're seeing how that would roll, and you're taking less, just giving each defenseman less ice time, like less opportunity there. And I really just think that's kind of the key there, because when you don't have your juggernaut pair and Anderson and Doughty who can play 25 minutes without you guys even blinking an eye, like you're going to be losing something there. And so I would be happy with either Jordan Spence or, who knows, maybe they call up Brant Clark, which I would be super excited about. I don't know. I think that's far fetched, but a lot of fans are clamoring for it. If they definitely need offense, that kid has got it in spades. But
yeah, they've and again, part of the reason I say that is like you said, Randy, to kind of ease it off of everybody, and I don't want to go too crazy. It's only been a handful of games, and they've played 77 minutes together, so that's not a significant amount of time. That's Gavrikov and Doughty. When the two are paired together, it's a 38% Corsi for, and it is a 25% expected goals. But when Doughty, it's obviously Doughty's numbers, and Gavrikov's for that matter too, are just drastically different when they're not on the same pair. I don't like the fit. And the biggest problem is just because Gavrikov has to play now top pair minutes, and he's established that he can't do that even on a good team, because when you're playing on a good team like the Kings, you're going to be in playoffs, and to now have Gavrikov play top pair minutes that Mikey Anderson was doing, that's not going to work. So that's why I like the idea of the extra defenseman if Mikey is out, just to kind of spread things out a little bit, because Doughty's going to play his 30 minutes come playoff time, as he should. He's an absolute horse, and hey, like, I don't hate the idea come playoff time if Mikey is out and you've got Spence in that lineup. Give me a Spence Doughty pairing every now and then for an offensive zone faceoff. I think if you play around with it and you use your deployment appropriately, you might be able to get something out of that.
I saw our boy Richard Sarabia mention, why not pair Jersey with Doughty? Which
I think I said that. Yeah.
Why not? I mean, you can have Sean Walker with Roy, or even Spence with Roy. Shake things up. I mean, if you can find a way to get Gavrikov kind of down and playing maybe back with Roy, and you have Jersey. I mean, Gavrikov Roy, like we've seen, has been pretty good. So if you don't want to mix things up there, why not try Jersey with Doughty and see maybe if you unlock a little bit something there? I mean, you can have Doughty be the retrieval guy in the 1-3-1. You can have Jersey just sit on the blue line, because I guess that'll limit maybe some of the turnovers that Jersey has, some of the flubs that we've seen from Jersey in the past.
The left side, Jersey's done fine with his zone defense on the left side, so it's not something he's not used to.
Yeah,
go ahead, Russ.
No, yeah, I mean, we all expect Doughty to be a little bit better of a player than Matt Roy, even though I think Matt Roy has been great this season. So it's not like you're losing anything there with having Jersey play top line minutes. He's already going against pretty tough competition as it is. So you get Jersey with Doughty, you have Gavrikov Roy, a line that's been pretty good, and then you can have a bottom pair with Walker Spence. Sounds pretty good with me.
I'll tell you my dream defense group, Brandon. This is if Anderson is back. This is the most balanced group they could have, and I think it creates a significant amount of problems and matchup problems for the opponent. You got Anderson, Doughty, Jersey, Roy, Gavrikov, Walker / Gavrikov, Spence. I think that's so deep and so balanced that I think is the best decor that they could put together and assemble for playoff time, assuming a Mikey Anderson injury.
You can run each of those pairs 18, 16 plus minutes and totally be fine. Yep. And you're not going to see any weakness. I mean, we've been clamoring for this ever since they traded for him. At the trade for Gavrikov, we said this was going to be me and you, Joe, but we were talking that this was more of an upgrade over what they had with Edler. So if you can find a way to pull Edler out of the lineup, you have slotting Gavrikov there with Walker as the bottom pair, even though McClellan has said that they brought him in to play top 4 minutes. I mean, that's just something that he really hasn't really excelled at. I mean, it is what it is. And if you can, I think, like we've talked about so much with the forward core. When this team was good, they had so much balance in that forward core.
Yes.
If you can bring that same balance to the defensive core, I think that'll help this team.
Now that hinges on Mikey Anderson being healthy. And man, fellas, I don't know if we're switching over topics or, but I got to say, the Kings can't survive that. I think they can survive Velarde, and they might even be able to survive Fiala, or at least like a 75% Fiala if he's not 100%. There's no like for like replacement for Mikey Anderson. Like I know last year they were down and Arvidsson, they were down Doughty, right, in playoffs, but you could make it work. Like you had Dursey, you had Spence, you had guys that can. They're not Drew Doughty, okay, but they're sort of a like for like. The Kings don't have a like for Mikey Anderson. That's a tall task.
I'm gonna tell you though why they can.
Okay,
because Jonas Corposalo and the way that him and Copley, the way they've been playing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they've shown that they can kind of, I don't want to say carry the Kings, but I mean they've been playing extremely good. So it's not like that. I mean, obviously Mike Anderson's huge, and we want him to play, and it brings that balance that we were talking about to the defensive side. But Corposalo and Copley have been really, really good of late. I mean, it looks like Corposalo is going to be the game one starter. I mean, they're still giving Copley a look, but I think I'd be surprised if Corposalo is not the starter. But I mean,
Copley played the biggest game of the season. Copley played.
Yeah, it's true. That's true. I mean,
I kind of agree with you, but when they started Copley against Edmonton, like home ice is on the line in this game, and still an outside shot at the division if you can win the game. And it was Phoenix Copley that got the start. That was I don't want to say I was shocked, but because Corposalo, he got the last Edmonton game, which broke up the rotation, I was a little surprised. So I don't know.
I think he was thinking more or less. Maybe it's a little easier of a defensive matchup with the last change. I mean, you can kind of focus more on that. You're not really leaning on the goaltender too much. But yeah, I mean, that was a huge game. So I think maybe he's saving Corposalo, that is, for the Vegas game tomorrow night.
Okay.
Where you're going to have the last change. You're in Vegas, tough environment. Let's see what Corposalo got. And then you can kind of run with that. I think if we see Copley, though, Thursday, I think McClellan's maybe tipping his hand, but I would expect Corposalo to be in net come Thursday.
Yeah, I think it's something, put him in a washer right now, but they have to find somebody. They have to pick somebody, and I would go with Corpy at this point. Not that Copley's hasn't played well at all. I mean, sure. He's been perfectly sufficient. And then you always have the confidence. We talked about all these hypotheticals about, when you're running both goalies, like how do you do if one person wins this and one person wins that? But in a world where we lose 2 straight games in Edmonton with Corposalo, like you wouldn't be surprised if they went Copley at home, right? And so to have confidence in both goalies, showing that he started him in Edmonton or versus Edmonton, I think it shows confidence there. And I think Kings fans obviously would be upset with 2 straight losses, but they would be okay making the change, where that was never the case, right? I mean, Quick was, if you went 0-2, you're riding Quick, regardless if he's playing well or not. Now you can switch it up and make that change if the first goalie that you pick falters. All right, we've 53 minutes in with this team. Let's get into a little post based on what we've seen on play. Let's get into a little foreshadow of the offseason. A lot of this was brought up. We thought this topic because it was very evident. A lot of people talking about extensions for both the trade deadline acquisitions in Korpisalo and Gavrikov. What maybe needs to happen for those extensions to happen? Do we even want those extensions to happen? Where do we see maybe more playing time for some of these prospects? How does that happen? I think I want to start with Joe here, because it was in our chat. You talked about, Gavrikov being thrown around for massive extensions, right? 8 years, 6 years, huge money. And then you talked about, you just don't see it. The Corsi 4 isn't there. He hasn't shown that he could dominate for a full game on the top pair at any point of his career. So what is other people seeing that you're not, or is it just the blinder's still on from the point streak and where he contributed to that.
Well, I and you guys tell me, because maybe I am the crazy one here, because, and maybe admittedly, full disclosure, that I may have a blind spot just for his style of play, just not how I'm building a team. This is just not my type of player. But he started off, and so we've played 16 games. Remember when he first started off, he was a house on fire. Look at that. So in the first 8 games, almost a 60% Corsi, over 72% expected goals, 64% scoring chances, 72%. He couldn't miss. He could do no wrong in those first 8 games. In those first 8 games, there were 2 playoff teams that they played. One of 7 home games, 2 playoff teams. One of those playoff teams was the Islanders. So take that for what it's worth. And we talked about, it's just like the Kings with their point streak. One thing that we talked about and I wanted to see, and I was like, when you asked me about the trade grade, like, ask me again in a month, because how does he do on the road against tough opponents, against when the rubber hits the road? I just want to see how that's going on. And like, I will say, he has exceeded my expectations on the whole. Like, as a whole, he is performing better than I would have expected. Right. I mean, his overall 50, he's in the green, in the blue, I guess, for when it comes to hockey charts, in all of those statistics. But I do think it's heavily because of those first 6, 7, 8 games against the opponents he plays. Because when you look at the last 8 games, which includes 4 playoff teams, and the other 2 non-playoff teams are Calgary, by the way, who now is tied for a playoff spot. 4 of those are road games. 2 of those against the Edmonton Oilers, a potential first-round opponent. He's sub 50 across the board. He's 48% in the Corsi Force, 42 in expected goals, 49 in scoring chances, only 45 high danger chances. So it's like, where are we with him? I don't see. So I see a guy I'm open to re-signing, but if I'm Gavrikov, I'm not taking what I would offer him. Like, you could talk me into like $3.5 million for 3 years for him. He's going to get more than that, right? Somebody's going to pay him $25 to $30 million, right? He's probably going to get a 5x5 or a 5x6. And you know what, Vladdy? He seems like a fantastic guy. Go get it. Go get your 25, 30 million, 100%. Just the Kings shouldn't be the one to pay it, because we're talking about a guy who has value. He does bring some value. I don't want to say he's like a useless player by any means, but it's like, you're talking about, he's got to be in the right fit with the right partner at home against the right matchups. Again, like, you're starting to throw all these things together when you see the full picture and you get a larger sample here of games. And it's like, okay, he's okay, but he struggles with big minutes. He's struggled on the top pair with Doughty. He's struggling against better competition. I'm like, I don't know. You guys tell me if I'm the crazy one here. So I'm okay with bringing him back at a deal that he wouldn't take. He should go get a bigger deal elsewhere. I don't see a $5 million for 5 years player. I think he's replaceable. I don't know. That's just where I'm at with him. And maybe I'm the wrong one. If I'm, like I said, I will say, I will admit he has exceeded what I would have thought expectation wise coming in. But what I've seen from, in these recent games, this is kind of where it's had me, was I was a little worried about. Like, I don't care about what you did against Montreal and St. Louis. I care about what you do against Edmonton. That's what I care about, because that's who you're playing in the first round. That's who's in your division. That's what, so that's where I'm at. And I don't hate the player. I have no interest in the potential contract he could get. That really, really scares me. A 5x5, a 6x6, that scares the crap out of me. If you tell me, hey, the Kings signed Gavrikov 3x3, he's going to play either in the second pair for some games, he'll play the bottom pair, I'm on board with it. And lastly, he hasn't yet been a positive impact on the penalty kill. When Gavrikov is not on the ice on the penalty kill, the Kings are giving up 5% fewer than league average expected goals against. So it's been what they're giving up is not that bad. When he's on the ice, they're giving up 8%, 5% in that 5 to 8. Now I'm getting my numbers jumbled, but 5 to 8% higher than league average than when he is on the ice on the penalty kill. So it's not as if he's bringing small sample, fully acknowledged small sample. He's not bringing this great impact on the penalty kill at the moment right now either. So maybe as we get a larger sample and he does play more into playoffs and he plays better, like things change. My opinion changes, but I'm sorry, I'm not seeing it. Russ, I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, Trapper agrees with you. Gav's earned a big raise, but is replaceable.
He's well said. So he's earning himself more exposure playing on the Kings, and I guess it is earning himself a big raise, and I think that's more than fair. I just don't think the Kings should pay it.
Well, it's tough too, because if you look at what the Kings are going to have to address in the offseason, I mean, it's right back to the left side of the defense, because more than likely Alex Edler isn't going to be back. Gavrikov is the free agent that we're all talking about. So besides Mikey Anderson, you don't have any other left shot defensemen. I mean, they've kind of shown their cards with Tobias Bjornfoot. We'll see what happens there. Maybe they give him more of a shot. But at that point, you're still looking for a legit top 4 defenseman. And me and you, Joe, and Brandon brought you too, probably, we don't really see Gavrikov as a top 4 defenseman on the left side if this team's going to be good. I was trying to find some comparables to see if maybe what he would be looking for. I kind of looked maybe at like a Ben Sherratt. I can see those two players being comparable. And Sherratt was given a 4 by 4.75 deal over this offseason, which, I mean, that's like, I'm with you, Joe. I think that's way too much. I mean, especially with the salary cap that the Kings are at right now. I mean,
it's very tough.
After Velarde, Velarde's probably going to be getting close to maybe $5 million a year. He could get that. I expect it to be a bridge deal. You don't want to be paying him more than 3 years to send him to UFA status. So you want to keep that RFA status intact. So I wouldn't expect it to be more than 3 years. But if it's 3 by 5, that wouldn't surprise me just based off his play. We're talking a 20 goal scorer in the NHL. Those don't just grow on trees. So after Velarde's signed, you're probably looking at like maybe $3 million, $4 million in cap space. Salary cap's only going to go up another $1 million next year. I mean, it's just tough because
you can't compound a bad situation with a bad decision.
Just because he's left-handed doesn't mean he needs to be fine.
Exactly. So the bad situation is the left shot D pipeline situation, whatever you want to call it, and making a bad decision by overpaying him because of a necessity would compound that bad situation.
Agreed.
He's going to have to address it via trade. It's going to have to
100%. 100%. You need to address the top 4 via trade, and the bottom pair has got to be that league minimum ish type of a
or even Bjornfoot. You can break if you play Bjornfoot a third pair defenseman 8-10 minutes a night, and you find a legit top 4 defenseman. Maybe you had a player like Dursey who could bring a lot of value in trade. I mean, I think his cap hit is $1.7 million, and he's an RFA after that. So that brings a lot of value, and you can kind of shed some salary. Maybe you add Sean Walker, but I think the biggest priority for Rob Blake, and if he can pull it off, is going to be trying to figure out a way to get out from the Cal Peterson contract.
Yes.
That's going to be the number one priority, because that is hampering him so much. I mean, we're talking about a $5 million player that no Kings fan is considering to be part of the roster next year. So if that's not the case, you're paying him $3.8 million to start games for the Ontario Reign. So Rob Blake has to – I mean, this is going to be –
which Portillo needs to be doing.
Which Villalta needs to be doing. Villalta's not even starting right now for the Reign because of Peterson's there. I was talking with Kyle Garcia about this at the game last night. It's just – it sucks because I want to see Villalta and play all these games. He just can't. You have Cal Peterson there who has to play because of his contract, and you're just trying to unlock something out of that, but he just can't play. And if Peterson's around next year, you're road blocking Villalta, you're road blocking Portillo. I mean, we might even start talking about buyout in the offseason just to figure out a spot, a reason to get those players some starts in the AHL. So I mean, that's going to be the number one priority. And we hope that he doesn't maybe overpay for Gavrikov. I mean, maybe Gavrikov is that third pair defenseman. Maybe he gives $3 million a couple years to, and then you trade for a top four. But after Velarde's re-signed, after some other players, and maybe given Rasmus Kupari, I think is an RFA, but it's going to be a small deal. I'm not expecting anything big. So after those players are re-signed, there's not a lot of room for Blake. So he's going to have to figure out a way to get rid of Peterson. Or
is there a pick that's off? Is there a pick that's off the table? Is there a pick that's off the table for you guys? Is it a first? Is it a second?
They don't have a first. So I mean, that's gone. I mean, it's got to be prospects. I mean, they haven't really. He's found a way to not have to trade prospects. The only one has been Brock Faber, and that's
this would be in the offseason. They would have a first in 2024.
Well, 2024, yeah. So, but not this summer. But I mean, yeah. So it's going to be prospects more than likely.
I definitely, again, I revisit. I'm going to revisit. I have no idea if Blake visited in the first place, but I'm going to revisit the Marcus Pettersson thing, because there's a lot. It's a shitstorm, and pardon my French, in Pittsburgh right now, and I don't know what's going on. And a player that I think is worth bringing up and talking about the offseason is Arthur Kaliev, and I wonder where they deem the future for him. He's been a player that struggled at 5-on-5, but I still think is a player that holds value in a trade. And I just think the player that he is, he's not a play. He's a shooting winger. When it comes to replaceable players, and I mean this in the nicest way, like Arthur Kaliev is not I don't mean to downplay what Arthur Kaliev can bring to the team, especially on the power play. But, you're looking at certain skill sets. He's not a play driving center. He's not a top 4D. He's not one of these elite goal scoring wingers at 5-on-5. So when you're talking about that type of player who, let's be honest, he's been in and out of the lineup, but is he that young guy that could still attract something when you pair him with a prospect or a good pick to bring something back? So that's a question. I don't know what Montreal does with Mike Matheson. I don't know what Pittsburgh does with Marcus Pettersson. There may be some other guys out there, but that is the route that I would go. Russ is in the trade from that position. And, you guys talked about the goalies a little bit. Of the two, Korpisalo is the guy that I would be most interested in keeping around. Again, and I went through the exercise, Russ, in the mailbag article that I did a few weeks ago, and boy, is it tough. There's no money here. I traded away Russ, Walker, Peterson, Iafallo, just for sake of the argument. And I gave Gavrikov like a $3 million deal. I think I gave Velarde a $3 million, like a bridge type of deal. Like, it wasn't. I was very conservative in what I did even, and it's very difficult to find the money to bring guys in. So that's why if I'm Gavrikov, go get the market and get your big money. And I kind of think Korpisalo could and should do the same, because there's going to be a team that gives Korpisalo a Jack Campbell contract.
Especially if we make it more than one round.
Yeah. So, and listen, if there's ever an example, it's Phoenix Copley. Like, the Kings, goalies are goalies, and if the Kings find the right style of goaltender to play in the way that they play, there's options out there either in the trade or in the free agent market to replace Korpisalo. I think
it's funny because Rob Blake, I mean, I think it's fair to say he did such a poor job with the Cal Peterson situation, but I think he did an extremely good job with Phoenix Copley in terms of re-signing him already and really early. Because I mean, like we're talking about with Korpisalo, if Copley ends up being the guy and he shines in the playoffs, he could have waited and got his bag in the summer, but he's already signed, so he's kind of locked in already. So I wonder if maybe they're talking to Korpisalo, thinking like, "Hey, we love what you're doing here. Let's bring you back for 2 more years at maybe $3 million a year, and you have your goaltending kind of locked up until maybe a Portillo or Villalta or somebody is kind of ready in the future." I mean, because you look at goaltending. I was playing around, just kind of looking around. I mean, look at all the Western Conference playoff teams. Dallas and Winnipeg might not even make it. They're the only teams that are bringing back the same goalie, in Jake Ottinger and Connor Hellebuck. Every other team has a different goalie. Colorado has a different goalie. Edmonton, LA. I mean, just name them. I mean, they're all different. I mean, Minnesota, Gustafson. They bring in Gustafson, who was kind of just a throwaway goalie in Ottawa, and all of a sudden he's unlocked something playing for Minnesota. It's just goaltending is this new thing where I've talked about it for years with my NFL friends, where don't pay your running backs. Just draft a young running back, run them to the ground, and then trade them away. And I'm a Charger fan. We're kind of dealing with that with Austin Eckler right now. But it is what it is. I mean, that's just the landscape right now. And that's kind of coming toward goaltending in the NHL, where you just kind of find these diamonds in the rough. You play them. You hope that they play good. You sign them to low-term deals, and then you just kind of let them go when they want to get their bag, because it just hasn't. I mean, go down the line. We brought up Jack Campbell. That hasn't worked out. Cal Peterson hasn't worked out. I mean, Darcy Kemper has kind of been up and down with the Capitals. So it is what it is with goaltending. You just kind of have to find these journeyman goalies. How maybe you find something good, a guy's really confident in his good mental state and can play well, and you ride him until you have to pay him again. So it is what it is right now for goaltending for LA.
I think you look at it, and I mean, fans do this a lot, and there's players that you have to lock up. Sure, we get it. We understand, your number one centers, your top wingers, this and that. But you got to find value at certain spots in the lineup, because you can't pay everybody. You can't just keep doling out this stuff. There's always going to be players. There's always going to be teams that are like the Kings that are going to be strapped. They're going to be giving away players for next to nothing, i.e. Minnesota with Fiala, right? So there's going to be chances to retool the lineup. Also, the Kings eventually have to make room for people to play on this team, right? You have all these prospects keep marinating. I mean, I don't know if you can over marinate something, but I mean, I'm sure there's times where you can over marinate a prospect. Like he doesn't get the opportunity to show you. And you're looking at teams that give these opportunities. I mean, look at Jason Robinson for Dallas. Came out of nowhere. Now he's one of the top wingers in the league, right? I mean, he was given an opportunity on a playoff organization to shine and came out of nowhere in a scoring. So I really just think it's something along those lines where, hey, Arvidsson, one of the most underrated players on this roster this season, doesn't get enough praise. He's expendable. I have followed. Phenomenal defensively, stepped up lately in scoring goals here. Obviously, is a jigsaw piece anywhere in the lineup. Expendable, right? Like you have to get cheaper, and you have to get production out of less money elsewhere in order to pay all these guys. And it's just fact. Like you can't keep paying everybody. Right. And no offense to Gavrikov, defensive defensemen grow on trees. Like you could find a guy that can do similar stuff for 1.75 million, 2 million and move forward. I mean, outside of Father Time getting a hold of Edler, he was making, 3 million last year. He was serviceable. Like you're looking at those types of deals there. I mean, Tuna has gotten no run this season, and every single game that kid plays in, solid. Right. So like, I don't understand where like all this is like, oh, we have to sign this guy. I think a lot of people are tying the extension into both these players because of the capital given up. And I think that would be foolhardy to lump those in with each other. The cost of a first round pick is what it took to better ourselves this season. It doesn't have anything to do with future contracts with these two players, and nor should it. You shouldn't feel obligated because you gave a first to overpay for either Gavrikov or Korpisalo.
Yeah, I mean, Edler was signed for almost league minimum.
League minimum.
He's played 64 games this year.
Yeah,
and on a 100-point playoff team. So. Yeah, this is something that you can go out and find via free agency, where you don't have to throw a bag to Gavrikov. And yeah, I think the top 4 LD too will come via trade. I mean, it's going to be maybe you have to trade away a player like Iafallo and Arvidsson. I don't want to say those players are expendable, but just because of where they're at in terms of salary cap for the Kings right now, you have to figure out a way to shed some salary. And for the Kings, they can be expendable because of the wingers that are kind of just in the wings, just waiting. Really, I mean, look at Kupari, who's had some time on the wing position. Maybe can get a little look back. Alex Laferriere is a young player. They kind of like what they see there. Apparently,
Martin Fagimo's 23 years old. Like eventually, he's going to have to play.
Exactly.
Right? You're going to have to play him to see.
Yeah. So, I mean, Akil Thomas, too. That's another player that's been hurt all year. And who knows? Maybe Alex Turcotte is healthy for a full season and eventually plays in the NHL again. So,
one thing I've been thinking about, and maybe this isn't a topic for today, but I'll just throw it out there, and maybe it's something we can talk about in the future and kind of as we see how the Kings do. But the other thing with Gavrikov is if you do say you lock him in long term, you're kind of locking into a style of play, I think, too, and the way the Kings play in the 1-3-1, and I just wonder. They do that because they have to, because that's the decor that they kind of have to operate with, and it works. Their defensive system works from a neutral zone. It's excellent, and they do a great job in the D zone as well, which is, from a team standpoint, they do it really, really well. What I wonder is, as you start to, unless they get traded, well, or some of them, Clark's not going anywhere, but when you start to incorporate more high skill into that back end with the Brandt Clark, you already have Sean Durzi there. Drew Doughty's there, obviously, right now. Mikey Anderson can skate. I think he's very versatile, probably more versatile than he gets credit for. Obviously, Jordan Spence, if he finds his way into this lineup, do you see them stick to this style that they play, or do they start to be a team? Because then you've also got the high skill kind of rover type of style that Kevin Fiala plays. You may bring more skill into the lineup in the next year or two with some young guys as well, as Kaliev moves up, as Velarde moves up the lineup. I just wonder if there does become some sort of a style shift with the Kings because of the personnel. Again, I have no thought, no answer. It's honestly just kind of a general question, something I've been thinking about lately, that Todd McClellan, I mean, what a masterful job, dare I say, that he's done the last couple of years dealing with injuries and dealing with certain players and knowing exactly how to operate with the skill set that he has. He's done a great job. And I wonder, as the team gets younger and more skillful, particularly on the blue line, does that change? I don't know. It's something I'm thinking about.
I don't think it does. I think you kind of, that 1-3-1 system that they adhere to, I think you stick with that because it almost forces players to focus on attention to detail and strategy and system, all words that we've heard all season long. So that way, I mean, because offensively, we've seen Fiala and Velarde and these skilled players be given more than the opportunity to do whatever they want in the offensive zone and skill wise, whatever, to make plays. And I'm sure that'll be the same with Brandt Clark and Jordan Spence, whoever's in the lineup on the defensive end in terms of offensive production. So I think you maybe stick to that kind of system, and then you can have them, maybe, especially for younger players, give them the opportunity to focus a little bit on that type. That way they don't have to worry about trying to, I don't know. I mean, just the 1-3-1 just seems like such an easy system to run, especially for young players. And it's something that they've been running. I mean, in terms of Jordan Spence already, he's used to it. Brandt Clark has had some time with it in the AHL and NHL. So I think that's something that they maybe stick to, but who knows? I mean, this is a team that's going to be getting more skillful as they bring up these type of players like a Clark, or I mean, maybe even a Spence, or let's say a Chromiak, or Akil Thomas is known for a skill player. So I don't know. It'll be something to watch in the next few years.
And part of it is the neutral zone and the 1-3-1. The other part of it is the D zone, because you see it. Watch that Edmonton game. I mean, they just simply get the puck and they just whack it into the neutral zone. And because you got guys like Trevor Moore, Victor Arvidsson are just Byfield just on their horse skating after it. Whereas, again, you may have some defensemen that can actually make a play with the puck. That do you let them? Do you let them try to skate it a little bit more? I don't know. Again, it's just and maybe in part of that goes with their forwards too. If as they add more skill to the forward goes, I don't know. It's just something we'll see how this develops over the next season or two. But something I had in mind as well.
It's an interesting hypothesis there. I think of a tough seeing T-Mac let off the reins a little bit with his team, but who knows? I don't know if it's something like, I know, like on it's a different sport. And Joe, you've actually coached the game more than me. Are there variations to this format to where, basketball teams switch from man to zone? You had football defenses, go from zone to press to this and that. Are there variations they could run of the 1-3-1?
Sure.
When they need to, quote unquote, run and gun, or so maybe we see more variations of this defense. And that comes with time. Obviously, we're multiple years in his tenure, but as you also have to coach with the hand that you're dealt. And as maybe we see more skillful players, we'll start to see more variations sprinkle off that 1-3-1, where the 1-3-1 is the foundation. And then they kind of throw some stuff out there. It'd definitely be something to look at. Well, I think that's going to do it for us here, guys. Hour 20 minutes in. Appreciate you guys coming in. As always, you can find all of our lovely work online at hockeyroyalty.com. Go ahead and buy yourself a t-shirt while you're at it. Get in there, like and subscribe to this. Hit the notification bell to see when we're going live every single week. Appreciate you guys coming to the chat. The chat was fire tonight. You guys are going back and forth, talking there. Really appreciate you guys for coming in. As always, find us at hockey_royalty, at Random Commando 24, at NHL Russell, at JW Paterino. If you're going on DraftKings, use our code THPN. Man, we got a couple games left, and then it's playoff hockey time. It's getting down to the nitty-gritty here. We need those points. Appreciate you guys coming in the chat. And as always, on this podcast, go Kings go.